All right, so I'm setting the ring gaps in all the pistons now so I can install them. So when I had these done at CSS, Jeff and them were nice enough to obviously mark which pistons they bored to which cylinder. So this is number 1. You're going to have your oil ring, the 2 little skinny guys and the actual little oil guy. Then you're going to have 2, the top ring and the bottom, well, the top ring and the second ring. The second ring is going to be your dark guy with the white scos. Top ring is going to be the bright shiny guy. Second one's basically scrapes oil. If you look at it carefully, you may not be able to see it, but it's actually beveled. They are marked on the top. These say N50. The N50 is what's going to go towards the top. So if you grab the M50 and look down, you'll see the bottom of it is beveled. So this ring grinds a little bit faster than the top ring, but overall I'm using this chintzy little Proform grinder. I don't know what the grit on this wheel is. It's probably like 80 or something. It grinds quick. I've already done 4, 3, and 2. So most people typically, I guess, would start with the second ring because it grinds faster. I'm just starting with the top ring just because it's my choice. So first thing I'm going to put it in the cylinder, check the end gap, and then I will continue to basically file the ring. So first, if you've had some oil in it or whatever, just preserving the cylinder, just kind of wipe it clean. Just getting contaminants out of it. Some people use motor oil, some people use WD-40. Just basically lube the cylinder so the ring can just go in easily. I like this weird gel WD-40 lubricant. It looks a little excessive at first. I know it's kind of getting all over the place. And I kind of just slather it around my hand just to make sure the cylinder is nice and lubricated. Just makes the ring installation, as far as putting it in, easier. Let's take the top ring again. Look for the N50 in this case. Or, yep, N50. Find that that's going to be the top. Going to just kind of push it in the cylinder a little bit. Then grab your piston. They make things that will just square the ring up. If you've got a flat top piston like I'm using, you can use that as it. I'm just going to kind of go down to about an inch deep. There you go, remove the piston. Now you grab your feeler gauge set. I'm already doing the other 3. I'm just going to grab 16 thousandths. I'm aiming for 20 overall total. So there you can see the gap between the piston. You're going to grab your feeler gauge. Basically see if you can stick it in between it. 16 barely just kind of gets in there. So again, I need to open that up to 20 thousandths. So the 20 thousandths feeler gauge is what actually goes in with a little bit of drag. Maybe 21 just barely starts but can't go into it. And that's where I'll call it. Alright, so this little chintzy grinder is supposed to be bolted to the table. I'm not doing that. You can use a bench grinder, you can use all kinds of things. Just be advised that obviously the faster this thing rotates and the grittier it is, the quicker it's going to take this ring down. The end goal is also going to be when you go to, after you're done grinding, and when you've achieved your gap still, you want the end, when you push this together, there to be no light. It's supposed to be a flat, basically a flat straight edge on both sides. If it's beveled or anything like that, that's not good. You want this to be a nice mating edge, this lip to this lip. So because of that, there's a lot of ways people do this. I'm not going to grind the right side. The right side I'm going to assume is already good to go, and I'm going to grind the left side only. That being said, you got 2 little posts on this guy. Basically butted up against it, and I'm going to be grinding the left side. So I'm going to rotate that into the grinding wheel a little bit. I'm going to put my hand here because I've already discovered that as I turn it, it's going to kick it up. Now it is going to be easier if you rotated clockwise. The problem with doing clockwise, it's going to push the burr that you're creating out towards the cylinder wall. Yes, we're going to sand it afterwards, and it's also takes the coating and supposedly rips it off and can cause it to flake. So, moral of this is you're going to grind inward. Grind the piston ring in towards the piston itself. So I'm just going to kind of push these 2 up against it so I know they're squaring. Hold this down and rotate. Again, this is a time-consuming process. It doesn't have to be. If you use a grinder, you could probably do this a lot faster. I'm going to grab then 1000 grit sandpaper and just give it a light. You can grab a honing stone. Just kind of give it a light little cleanup just to make sure if there's any little burr on it. She's gone. Alright, this might be hard to see. I'm going to try to show it my best. This is a 19 thousandths feeler gauge. Goes in there nice and smooth. Now I'm just going to skip to a 21 thousandths feeler gauge, which is It would probably be fine too, but it's not what I'm aiming for. It just tries to start to get in there, but I can't push it in. So I'm going to go to my 20 thousandths feeler gauge. And it's a nice, it required a slight little push, and it takes a little bit of some drag to get it back out. So therefore I'm at 20 thousandths. Have my end gap, and now I'm install do that for the bottom ring as well. I'm not going to repeat the process for you. It'd be the same exact process, except I'm going to go to 22 thousandths on the second ring. Everything's kind of good with the ring, so now we're going to put the actual piston on the rod. So you're going to have your valve reliefs here. You're going to have the exhaust go towards the front bumper. The intake, obviously, towards the intake, the back of the car. On the rod, the way that the factory on Hondas are installed, at least, there's some debate again whether or not to do this. I'm just following how Honda does it, so it obviously works, so just continue it. In your rod, there's going to be a notch. The notch is going to go towards the exhaust side. So the exhaust faces the exhaust side. The smaller valve reliefs are the exhaust side, and it's going to go like so. So before you put it on, these little tiny snap rings. These are not actual snap rings that like snap ring pliers would work with. These are just it's like a little press C-clip. If you see on here, there's a little end in here which will help you push it in there, but then if you push it in there, then you want the opening of the actual clip to not be centered in there. So it's kind of a pain in the ass for me, at least, to move them once it's already in there, so I just install it already offset from it. Then once it's in there, I kind of put my hand over the top of the actual opening, grab a flathead, and you don't need any pressure. Don't like to scrape anything up here. Just kind of gently pull towards you. She's in and she's offset. So now orientate, just remember smaller valve reliefs towards front bumper. Alarm. Notches towards front bumper. Grab some assembly lube. You don't gotta be shy with it. Just kind of lather it all around. Find the opposite end that you stuck it in, the actual C-clip. It should go in with ease. Grab your rod. She's in. Now you got to put the other C-clip in the other side now, so that the wrist pin can't back out. This side's, in my opinion, even easier than the other side. Same exact concept as I just described. Don't have the actual opening of the C-clip line up with the little indent there. Again, it'll help you if you put it in that way and then kind of just push it to the side. For me, it's easier just to kind of... I'm going to use a flathead just to sort of gently... Probably heard it snap in there. Just kind of do a little bit of a... Pin doesn't want to come out. C-clips there. Notch to notch. Keeping the piston rings that I did for that piston. Alright, now time to install the piston rings and all the pistons. Alright, so now we got to put the rings on the piston. We will clock them, meaning we're going to put them in a certain orientation on it. I'm just not going to do it right off the bat. I'm not going to do that until I actually go to put it into the cylinder. Just because me putting them around like this, stuff's moving around, so forth. So again, we've got technically 3 sets, we'll call it. Because all the lube I was using, stuff's kind of sticks together. Alright. So, the one I put on first is the oil expander. It's going to be this weird, little springy looking guy here. When it's installed, you're going to want it to the 2 ends. You're going to want them to not overlap. I don't know if it's going to come through in the camera. If you can't tell, when you have them in front of you, you're going to understand. You're going to want them just to butt up against each other. When they're butted, that's what you want. It's going to go down along the very bottom where you see the little oil holes sticking out of the side of the piston. quite easy. Just kind of walk it around there. It expands pretty easily. Boom, it's on. Then you're gonna grab the two thinnest rings. They're gonna go on with that. One's gonna go above it and one's going to go below it, but on the same rail, if that makes any sense. So in the same groove, just one's gonna go on top and one's gonna go on the bottom. So the one on the top, I'm just gonna kind of stretch it by my hand a little bit. Be a little careful, but they're pretty thin. And there it is, you can kind of look. It's probably gonna be hard to show on the camera, but it's on top. The one on the bottom, so instead of going around it, I mean, you can do it any way you want. I'm just gonna come up around the rod. It's just closer to the bottom. And same exact thing, just kind of gently pull it apart and walk it up onto that surface. And boom, it's on. Now for the other two rings, some people stretch them by hand. I mean, it's just kind of, you can get them on there. I'm not going to argue that you can't. I mean, people do it all the time. I'm not going to say I've never done it. But you can do that, or you can get just kind of a ring expander. Little snazzy tool. All it does is just kind of open the ring up. So again, we're going to do the N50 on these up. I'm going to do the second ring first. You slide it into this little tool. Basically, they can't go out, and it just sort of holds it and opens it up for you. All right. So I'm going to do that and slide that above onto its groove. And once you kind of have it lined up there, you can kind of let go of the ring compressor, the ring expander, and boom, she's there. Same thing for the compression ring. That was the oil scraper ring. And 50 up. Boom. Easy peasy. Alright, so here's the chart from Weisco showing how to gap the rings. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of move the orientation of that ring in that specific spot. Now it's a disaster over here that I've got. I just really wish I had more of a workspace. After you've got your rings already kind of set up in that area, I like to grab oil. I'm using the same oil that I'm using to break the motor in, basically. I'm going to put it all over the skirt of the piston. Just kind of lube it up. Do the same with the cylinder wall. Alright, so once you've got the cylinder wall also lubed up, grab your spring compressor, slide it over it to try to help the rings from not moving. Kind of put a little bit of pressure on it. You're just going to tighten this guy down. I leave some of the skirt exposed, and after that we're going to take it to the block. Alright, once you have it there, again, like I mentioned, lube the cylinder it's going into. This is cylinder 2. Give it a nice good coat. I personally would put a bearing at this time. So again, notch goes towards the exhaust side. Gently press it in. There's no need for assembly loop at this point in time. Make sure your crank that the journal this is piston is going to sit onto now is rotated further down. So when I tap this in, the actual rod does not smash into the actual rod journal. Give it a light little tap just to make sure it is seated. Doesn't take much. And I kind of like to just kind of hold downward pressure on it and just a couple light taps. Boom, she's in. So now I'm going to repeat those steps again for cylinder 3 because we're going to do both those at the same time. Wipe off those journals. I'm going to do just to make sure that they're dry and clean. We're doing the same thing we did for the crank and whatnot, so we made sure with plastic gates that everything, all the tolerances were good. So I already got 2 bearings installed on them. I'm just going to pull the rods up gently. Here you go, so they're mounted there. So now if you mix up the caps, at least with these Skunk 2s, it's okay. Most should have it. There's a little number on the back. You may not be able to see it. This one says 0459. I don't remember which one that went to, but it's number 3 here. So wipe the bottom of the journal here. Put a fresh, I'm going to put a fresh bearing in there. Do the same thing. The other journal. All right, so the same thing we did again for the crank now. I'm going to grab some plastic gauge and essentially lay a 1-inch strip again. If you already watched other videos, it's going to be the exact same thing, so I'm just going to do that for these. The only thing different that I'm going to do is when I go to torque the rod bolts in, I'm going to use ARP's assembly lube. Skunk 2 said that goes to a torque of 46, so I'm basically doing a 23 first step, then a 46 second step. And they said if you don't have a rod struts gauge, which I'm not using, that if you do it 3 times, it should achieve it. So I'm going to torque these twice, essentially, back them off, put plastic gauge on them for the 3rd time, torque it, and then actually check the plastic gauge, and on the 4th, I'm just gonna torque it and we should be good. That's the way I'm doing it. So yeah. Dead nuts 1.5. I'm gonna grab some assembly lube. I'm gonna drop some of that on the bearing on each of them. I'm also going to put it on the journal here of the crank. If you want it smeared around with your finger, it will mix around anyways as you start rotating the crank. But just gonna pull the rods back up. Same thing, gonna put some assembly lube. I'm going to grab each one of these bolts again, put just a nice fresh thing of assembly lube. Probably not necessarily needed, but it's already kind of on the threads, but all right, let's ship it. Let's go to 23 foot-pounds. Let's do the final 46. All right. Let that just kind of cycle around there. I'm not going to put it on the bearings, on the actual girdle. That'll kind of just smear around there. All right, so if you're looking for the part number, here's the new rear main seal part number. I'm going to put a light bit of coat of oil around this, press it inside there, put some Honda Bond light coat around the outside, and put it on there. You don't gotta get crazy with it. It's kind of annoying on an engine stand, but kind of the same steps as the rear main seal. It's a brand new Honda oil pump. Let's put a new O-ring down there. Same thing with the Honda Bond. Make sure the surface is nice and clean. Spread a All right, so it was gonna rain and I had to try to hurry up and do some stuff. So for the most part, I got new hardware for everything. I have all new nuts and bolts for the oil pan. I put a light, thin coat of Honda Bond around it, very thin, just like a 1/8 inch, just real smeared it out lightly, just so it doesn't squeeze and go into the actual, into the motor. So I'm gonna lay the gasket on, put the pan on, and torque it down. So I also applied a very, very light, thin coat just to the actual oil pan itself, just so there's a light coat around all of it. The helm's manual does not say to do that, but just through experience, I decided just to do it. Now we're going to be going to 8.6 foot-pounds. What I'm going to do though is tighten them all in the sequence. I'm going to just do it in 2 steps just to kind of evenly set the pan down. Some may agree with that, some may not. So something that slowed me up this morning, I backed each one of these rear main seal bolts out one by one, and I backed one out, put a brand new bolt in, torqued it, and did that to all of them. I found a bag of bolts and I was like, what do these bolts do? I know I had ordered new oil pan bolts and whatnot, but I just could not figure out what those went to after going to Accurate Parts Now and just siphoning through stuff. That's what it ended up being. So that's that. The oil pan that came with the motor was trash. I had to get a new baffle, a new oil pickup. Those were also trash, which is why I got on new parts. And I figured while I was getting them, I might as well get brand new nuts and bolts as well. All right, so the whole bottom end's assembled.